It is Monday, October 13th, 2025. I'm Nate Eaton. Welcome to Courtroom Insider. So glad you were here. We have a lot to talk about tonight and some breaking news that came down today in the Ellen Greenberg case that I know is going to infuriate many of you. So many questions. We have some interesting Coburger news that we're going to talk about. Also, a prison tour. Another prison tour in the men's prison here just for you tonight on Courtroom Insider. And then all these high profile cases lately. We've got Luigi in New York, the guy accused of killing the CEO of United Healthcare. Chad Daybell, Lori Daybell, of course, they're high profile. Brian Coburger, of course. Tyler Robinson now in Utah. How do prisons handle high profile inmates? What do they do about them? To protect them, to protect the inmates, and to protect you and the people that work in the prison. I have here a little bit later the former assistant director for the Federal Bureau of Prisons. She's here. Her name is Judy Garrett. She dealt with high-profile clients, and we just barely wrapped up an interesting conversation that I'm going to play for you in just a minute. So all that to talk about. Again, let me know where you're watching from if you have any questions and what you want to know. And let's just jump right to it. Breaking news today in the Ellen Greenberg case. Now, we've covered this here on Courtroom Insider. Ellen Greenberg is the teacher who back in 2011 was found dead in her Philadelphia apartment with 20 stab wounds. Remember this? She's a 27-year-old teacher. It was a blizzard. She was cooking something or had just purchased ingredients for something when her boyfriend says he went to work out, went back to the apartment, like work out there in the building, in the facility, went back to the apartment and couldn't get in because the security door latch had closed from the inside. One of those that you can't lock from the outside. Once the police arrived, they determined, an autopsy determined that she had been stabbed 20 times, including in the neck, back, head, heart. 11 bruises all over her body in various stages of healing. And the knife was found protruding from her chest. I spoke with Nancy Grace a few weeks ago about this. She spoke about this at CrimeCon. And this is what Nancy said at the time about the case.
So Ellen has her master's degree, super smart, and she was teaching first grade. Her dream job. That's what she wanted to do. That day, Nate, a blizzard set in. This is in Philly. A fancy suburb of Philly. So all the children had to go home early. She was not expected home to the apartment she shared with her fiance that she believed was Mr. Wright. But she came home early and she spent, I don't know how long, calling every single parent to make sure that their children got home. She had stopped on the way to fill up her tank of gas for if she needed to, in case she needed to leave for some reason and couldn't get to the gas station. She came home and started making a giant fruit salad for lunch. The fiance comes home, then he comes to the apartment, then he leaves to go downstairs to the workout club in the building. He works out for about 45 minutes, Nate, and then comes back up. He says when he comes up, he has to break down the door to get in, that it's locked from the inside. Of course, all that evidence is destroyed, when you break down a door, evidence that it was locked or not locked is destroyed, obviously. But he comes in and immediately sees Ellen lying. Actually, more correctly, sitting up. Her bottom is on the kitchen floor. Her legs are splayed out in front of her, and she's leaning back against the kitchen cabinet, Nate. She's dead. In those 45 minutes, someone has come into the apartment and murdered her. But police think in those 45 minutes, or at least they say it, that in just 45 minutes, she says, you know what, forget the fruit salad, forget the save the dates I've just sent out for my wedding with the venue book, the band book, the food selected, the dress bought. I have a beautiful picture of her in her wedding dress. It was going to be a big shindig, and she was so excited. But in the middle of the fruit salad, she goes to, hey, with that, I'm just going to kill myself. Then here's the kicker, Nate. She stabs herself 20 times, Nate, including, wait for it, 10 times to the back of the head, the back of the neck, including one wound so severe the back of her neck slices her own dura,
Mm.
D delta URA, the protective sheath surrounding her spine. But yet, miraculously, even slicing her own dura, she continues to stab herself 10 more times.
Yeah.
The medical examiner, and this is attached at the back of the book, Nate, says that at least, and this has been looked at by many experts that say one of the wounds, at least one, was administered post-mortem after her heart quit beating. There is no way she did this. Number one, you're married, you have a wife, you have a daughter. A lot of times women can't even zip a zipper on a fancy dress, right? And she stabbed herself 10 times in the back and kept stabbing. And Nate, and she's right-handed. In her left hand, Nate, she's still holding a pristine white dish towel. So she stabbed herself holding the dish towel. And Nate, one more thing. In the book, you will hear about the wrong way blood. As I told you, she's sitting up, slumped against the cabinets like I'm doing right now. I did a reenact with our friend Joseph Scott Morgan, professor of forensics. She's sitting up, but blood, Nate, do it with me. Use your right index finger. Blood was dried from her nose to her ear, perpendicular. Now, again, I'm not a physicist. I was a Shakespearean literature major, but I've heard of Sir Isaac Newton. All right? If she had died that way, the blood would be going down. This proves to me she was lying supine, and the blood trickled down, it coagulated and dried. It had time to do that, dry, and then she was propped back up.
Now, that was a few weeks ago talking with Nancy Grace, who wrote a book about this called What Happened to Ellen? A Miscarriage of Justice. Because here's where the story gets interesting. So the assistant medical examiner at the time, Dr. Marlon Osborne, ruled Ellen's death a homicide. Weeks later, he changed it to suicide after meeting with the Philadelphia police. Once it was changed to suicide, it prevents a criminal investigation from happening because it was a suicide. There was no crime done. All done. Then, and I want to make it clear too, Goldberg's fiance was never a suspect, and he's never been charged with a crime. But for 14 years, her parents, Sandy and Josh Greenberg, have sought to get answers in their daughter's death. They've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. They hired experts, including a forensic pathologist, a forensic neuropathologist, who found evidence of strangulation, and they believe Ellen's death was staged. The couple gathered over 167,000 signatures asking the city to reopen the case. They filed 2 lawsuits against the medical examiner's office and the city, alleging the investigation was so botched and that there was a cover-up. Well, back in February, the Greenbergs settled the lawsuits, and as part of, there was a monetary payment of an undisclosed amount, and city officials agreed to reevaluate her death. Great news. In the meantime, Dr. Osborne, that medical examiner, signed a statement saying he no longer believes that she died by suicide. So, a few weeks ago, ABC released a documentary called Death in Apartment 603, What Happened to Ellen Greenberg, with the parents. It was a 3-part docuseries. It included interviews with her parents, closest friends, experts who detail why they believe that she was murdered. One expert suggested that some of the wounds were inflicted after she had died. So all this comes down to we're waiting for this big decision. Well, on Friday, a 32-page memo came out, a review from the Philadelphia chief medical examiner, Lindsay Simond, who said that they conducted an unbiased review, that The former, all the records have been reviewed. The documentary was reviewed. The private investigator hired by the family was interviewed. But in the end, she said, while the distribution of injuries is admittedly unusual, quote, the fact remains that Ellen would be capable of inflicting these injuries herself, noting she was a young woman suffering from anxiety. Simon writes that, quote, the fiance's DNA was not detected on the knife used to inflict the injuries. There was no evidence of an abusive relationship. There was no signs of any struggle at the scene. And with all of the information considered, it's the opinion of the undersigned that it is best classified as a suicide. All opinions stated in this report are expressed with a reasonable degree of medical certainty. So there's obviously a lot of questions about this. I'm sure her family does not agree with this. And there is a court hearing tomorrow on this very case. So tomorrow on Courtroom Insider, we'll talk about what comes of the court hearing. But once again, Ellen Greenberg case now ruled a suicide. And it's just makes you go, let's talk about Bryan Coburger. Remember last week we talked a little bit about the judge unsealing the witness list. Interesting thought about people on the list. I think there were 180 names. Let me pull it up. 180 names, but I should say potential witnesses, not guaranteed witnesses. These are people who could have been called by the prosecution. They had 180 names potentially on their list. The defense also released their list. Didn't release it. It was unsealed. Here's what we know about who was on the prosecution list. The main one that stuck out, Bryan Coburger's sister, Amanda, for the prosecution. This is Amanda when she was leaving court on July 23rd, the day that Coburger was sentenced. And she would have been called to testify, perhaps, in her brother's murder trial. She was the only immediate family member of the Coburger family on that list. And it would have been interesting to see what she would have had to say. Latah County Prosecutor Bill Thompson told me, you remember in our interview a few months ago, that he said he doesn't believe, he said publicly that he doesn't believe that the Coburger family helped Bryan in any way. But what would she have to say to add to the prosecutor's side? I want to add here that she's also on the defense's side. She was on both lists. She would have testified perhaps for both sides. Other notable names, including on the prosecution's list, Bethany Funk and Dylan Mortensen. Those are the roommates. We heard from Dylan at the sentencing hearing. She spoke. Bethany submitted a written statement. And then also Ethan Chapin's triplet brother and sister, Hunter and Maisie Chapin. They were the only two immediate family members of any of the victims who were set to testify, probably because they had both been at the scene on the morning that the victims were discovered. Their bodies were found. In addition, there was also the defense during the mitigation phase. That's if he had been found guilty, who would have testified. And Coburger's sister was on that list. They had 56 people on that list, including Coburger's other sister, Melissa. This was for the mitigation, meaning please spare him. Don't give him death. Give him life. Michael and Marianne Coburger, his parents, and Washington State University professor John Snyder. Coburger worked as his teaching assistant at Washington State University. Coburger was not on the list per se, but they still could have called him. And that would have been interesting if he would have testified. So did him knowing that his sister might be called to testify for the prosecution encourage him to take the plea agreement? That's a thought. A lot of people think that, but we don't know. We'll see. And that kind of leads to our next discussion about Coburger and these high profile inmates. He is currently in the J block of the Idaho Department of Correction. And I went out there about 3 or 4 weeks ago. We toured one of the facilities, not where Coburger is. So that's like Max, the J block. Chad Daybell is there too. Death Row is there. While they're on J block, if you walk it, think of like a pod situation where you could have like the A block and there's A1, A2, A3. It's not like they're seeing each other every day that I know of. They might be able to, but I doubt it. The Death Row people are, together from what I've been told. still on 8J block, but Coburger could be over here. Also, we know Coburger is segregated, likely for his own safety. But the facility we went to housed minimum, medium, and closed custody inmates. Close closed custody inmates, right? 2,128 beds, men. And I want to show you some video. This was part of a media day. They invited the media to go out and explore the facility. This was, a typical prison, as you can see, the gates, the chain link gates, the doors that close the gate, chains, going and closing, concrete hallways. But here's what I wasn't expecting: a wood shop with like saws and screwdrivers and hammers and tools. Yeah, there are inmates that go in and they make beautiful work, like this beautiful wood floor. The inmates made this. They do beautiful jobs. They learn how to use their hands to create stuff. There were classrooms where inmates used to get their GED and further their education and take classes. The license plates that you and I drive in Idaho, use on our cars, we don't drive them, we put them on our cars, they're made here. We got to see them making the plates, and they were rolling out kind of the new line of plates that's coming out, which was fascinating to see. These guys are working. They get 40 cents an hour. 40 cents an hour. That's it. It goes on their books, or it could go toward restitution. There were gardens, beautiful gardens. I mean, look at these. Volunteers come in and help run them. There were workout rooms, outdoor rec areas, and other parts of the prison. I think that when a lot of us think about prisons, we think about inmates that are just hanging out in their cells all day watching TV. And sure, there are some that do that. The vast majority we saw, though, were out and about, like talking with their other inmates and playing cards and doing classes and learning. In fact, we had as tour guides with the prison officials, we had two inmates, one who's serving time for murder and one who attacked. His wife was having an affair. He attacked the guy that she was having the affair with, and now he's in prison. Most clean-cut guy you'd ever meet. Most soft-spoken, kind guy you'd ever meet. Not a typical person that you'd think would be like, oh, this is a dangerous inmate. Now, there of course, there are those type of people in prison. I don't want to paint it with like a rose-colored brush and be like, oh, it was perfect, because it's not. It's prison. But I think sometimes if we open our minds a little, we can see other things that are happening there in the prison. We did get to go into the minimum security pod. They walked us right into where the inmates are just hanging out. We got to go in one of their cells, and it kind of felt like a dorm room in a college in a way. I mean, dorm rooms, you have more space and you actually get like a nice sink, and you don't have a toilet that's right by your face when you're lying down for sleep. But they had it kind of decorated with stuff they bought off of commissary, and they had pictures on the wall and things like that. And then we went into the medium security, and the gentlemen in there, the inmates were very nice, talkative, and they of course swarmed around us because there were some reporters, female reporters who were with us, who were pretty ladies that the guys, came over to talk. We did not go into the closed custody units because you can tell why it's closed custody. When we walked in there, one of the guys freaked out and was like, "What are you doing? We're not zoo animals." Those are the more high risk guys. And we quickly walked through, not into the pod, but around the pod areas. What they have is in the center, there's like the control panel, and then there's the pods around it with like walking space you can go to. So in the first two areas, we actually went in, and then the others, we just walked around. It was an interesting tour. And I just wanted to show you some of the video of it just to kind of give us another look at what things are like inside the prisons. And that leads me to high profile cases. I mentioned Tyler Robinson, Coburger, Daybells, the Luigi Mangione in New York, all high profile cases. And this isn't anything new. There's been high profile cases forever. I think what may have changed now is you've got social media, you've got YouTubers, influencers who chase these crime stories. And there's ways now more than ever for people to get the type of information they want about these cases than ever before. You can find probably 50 channels on YouTube right now devoted to Luigi Mangione, the guy in New York. It's just out there. And I wanted to, kind of find out how these prisons prepare for these high profile inmates, especially when you got to get them back and forth to court. How do you handle that and keep from people getting shot or hurt or inmates? I remember years ago in Utah, the security took an inmate to the hospital, and was one of the security guys was killed by the inmate, and it was horrific. It was horrible. He killed the guy, and then I think he went on a chase and was busted at a Wendy's. Let me look. I don't know if that sounds. Utah inmate kills guard. Let me look it up here. Yes, Curtis Algier. In 2007, a white supremacist inmate killed a guard at a medical appointment for back pain. Officer Stephen Anderson, a 22-year-old corrections veteran, Algier overpowered him, stole his gun, and shot and killed him. He then carjacked an SUV and led police on a high-speed chase. The chase ended when he fled into a Salt Lake City Arby's, not a Wendy's, where a customer disarmed him after the gun malfunctioned. He tried to kill a worker there. Algier pleaded guilty in 2012, was sentenced to life in prison without parole. I remember that clearly. He went to get an MRI at the doctor, and was then killed. So that has happened before with inmates. How do they handle them now with people flocking to courthouses to see these people? Former assistant director for the Federal Bureau of Prisons, Judy Garrett, has quite a career working in the prison system, at least the federal side. Well, actually local. When she was 20, she started as a correctional officer. She said she had braces. Beautiful blonde woman, young woman walks into a prison and they're like, you want to work here? She went on to get a law degree. She went on to study public affairs. She went on to become the assistant director for the prisons. She has since retired, but she was able to sit down with me earlier today and talk about a lot of these aspects. So here is my interview with Judy. Joining me now is Judy Garrett, and Judy has quite a bit of experience working in law enforcement in the prison system, right? Judy, can you give us a bit of your background?
Sure. I was first introduced to the criminal justice system right after college. I took a job as a correctional officer at Western Wayne Correctional Facility outside Detroit, Michigan. To give you an idea, I was 20. I had braces. I'm about 5'3.5", 115 pounds. Wore my hair in a ponytail. Walked into that facility of 600 to 700 men, serving everything from 5 years to natural life. It was quite an experience. It was a great year. I learned a lot, put my parents through a lot of stress and strain. Then went on to law school. After law school, clerked for a judge who suggested I look at a job at the Department of Justice. Took a job with the Federal Bureau of Prisons, where I started in the honors program as an attorney, then moved my way up through the agency to become assistant director for information policy and public affairs. I spent a total of about 29 years with the Bureau of Prisons. I think the last 10, I was assistant director. That was a great job because it gave me the perspective of the entire criminal justice system, both federal and state, working with the White House and the Hill and judges, policymakers, advocates about every issue you can possibly imagine. But it also allowed me to be very involved in the day-to-day operations of the Bureau of Prisons, whether it is population projections or research on the effectiveness of our programs, policies regarding private prisons, how much we should spend on substance abuse treatment, you name it. So
Wow.
I had a phenomenal career. Yeah.
What a background. I like the fact, too, that you worked in the prison, but also have a law degree and the experience of working with public affairs, which a lot
Right.
of times you don't have the public affairs or the media relations type of side of a job. And that can be critical, especially when there's kind of a negative stigma, I think, for a lot of people when it comes to the prison system. Did you find that as far as in your career experiencing that people would look at the prison system and think, oh, they're all bad guys, lock them up, horrible conditions? And how did you deal with those type of thoughts that people had?
It's really unfair and unfortunate. I know why people have that perspective. When you look at the media, prison guards, as they're often referred to, are typically depicted as not very smart, not very sophisticated, often subject to corruption, whereas whether it's the U.S. Marshal Service or the FBI or the cops on the street are the heroes. And it's very unfair and very inaccurate. People who work in corrections are some of the most compassionate, smart, innovative people you will find in law enforcement. It takes an awful lot to walk through those gates every day. You are locked in with the incarcerated population. You don't have any weapons. All you have is your ability to communicate with people and work with people and navigate difficult situations, often by yourself. Typically, staff are in a housing unit with 250 inmates. That's it, you and them. So it's a tough job. It's a tough job, and I wish people understood more about what it was like inside prison, because I think it would give them a much better perspective. In terms of how it was for me, I spent a lot of time trying to make that case and trying to explain to folks why they should fund prisons, why they should support prison staff, why they should give us the resources that we needed so that both staff and inmates could live in a positive environment, which exists in a lot of prisons, contrary to what you see in the media.
Right. I tell you what, my eyes were open about 3 weeks ago. I went through an Idaho prison, and they had a wood shop in there where inmates were making beautiful wooden doors, the floor. They had a license plate facility where they were making the license plates. They were cooking. They were in school. They actually had classrooms and a library. Rather than what we do see in the movies, where it's, fights and hardened people, arguing with each other. So yeah, I get what you're saying there. A lot of people become really focused too on these high profile inmates, like here in Idaho, Brian Coburger. There was a video leaked of him in his cell walking back and forth. And I know some of the comments were, he's in such a huge cell. Why is he given royal treatment? Can you walk us through what it's like for prison administrators, not necessarily in this case, but just in general, when you get a high profile inmate? How do you handle somebody like that?
Those are very difficult cases. Nobody wants them at all because it is just a headache and stress and worry. You need to keep them safe from themselves, from others. You need to keep other people safe from them potentially. You want to manage the perception of the media, of the legislators, of the policymakers. So it's just a headache. Prison administrators want to just run their facility in peace, right? They don't need everybody's thoughts and opinions and advice. But when you have somebody like that, you get everybody's opinion and insight. It's very challenging. When you have somebody like that, who you have to isolate from the rest of the inmate population, at least for a time, for their safety and everyone else's safety, it's difficult because there's no situation under which somebody can be kept apart from the population and not suffer from that in a way. When you are pulled away from everybody, that's punishment. That's prison in and of itself. Now you have to put them in a prison inside a prison. That person then has everything brought to them as opposed to them being able to go out and participate in the communal life, because prison is a community. Now you're pulling that person out of that community. So it takes a lot of staff resources and a lot of planning to bring everything to them so that they can function within their individual cell typically, which is how it works. When they come out of the cell, you typically have 2 or 3 staff with them, depending on the person, again, for their protection, for everyone else's protection. So it's sucking up a lot of staff resources to care for this one individual. And nobody wins. Everybody is being beat up for the way they're doing it. As you said, they're giving them too much. One side. The other side said, you're not giving them too much. It's inhumane. They're in solitary confinement. It's not right. There's no easy answers. There's no great way to do it where you can satisfy all the different constituents. But in fact, it's done very similarly in every institution around the country. It's easier if the facility is designed for that kind of a situation, which most aren't. And it's just never easy.
Yeah, and when it comes to getting them back and forth between like court hearings, if you have to take them off site and get them to a courthouse and transport them, we saw it a little bit with the Luigi Mangione in New York case. what type of preparation and training goes into that? Because you would hate for someone to, you know, fire a gun at them or hurt them in the process. You still have to protect them, even though everyone might hate them. They still have their rights. What goes into that?
Those are some of the highest risk situations. Nobody likes them. There have been Bureau of Prison staff killed on inmate escort trips and others around the country, I'm sure. It is a very scary situation, and my hat's off to everybody that pulls it off, whether it's the staff doing the escort or the staff planning it. It's dangerous, and everybody knows. As much as you try to do it secretly, times that people aren't aware, routes that people aren't aware, especially in this day and age, there are no secrets. So people are aware, people know, people are waiting for you, and it's terrifying. Staff typically wear stab-resistant vests, but in situations like that, they're going to be wearing bullet-resistant vests because now you're out in the community and it's not just knives and shanks. You're worrying about bullets as well. So yes, we're worried about the person we're transporting, but we're worried about those staff also because they're putting their lives on the line to get this person back and forth to where they need to be. It's wonderful now that we have as much technology as we do so that we can limit those sorts of visits. And so we can do much more over video conferencing. That is saving lives every day where we are not having to pull people out of the institution going back and forth to the court. Of course, we need to make sure we are respecting people's rights of access to counsel and all that and not interfering with their right to due process. But as much as possible, if we can do those things over video technology, it's really phenomenal.
Yeah. And that's what happened a few weeks ago with the Tyler Robinson case in Utah, the man accused of shooting Charlie Kirk. One of the things, Judy, that seems to come with a lot of these high-profile cases, I mentioned Luigi Mangione in New York. He has supporters, a lot of them. What type of mail are the prisons getting for these high-profile cases? A lot of women that might like the inmate, or men, both. If it's a female client or even a male client, how do you handle that? I mean, in general, what do the administrators have to do? Do you have to hand them over their mail? Is it all technically theirs, or how are things like that dealt with?
Mail is a really scary area also because over the past several decades, the use of the mails to facilitate the introduction of contraband has become much more elevated in terms of risk. The types of drugs that are coming in through the mail that are so dangerous with just a little bit of exposure, what happens to people. Typically, mail would be opened, scanned, read, reviewed, shake out the envelope, etc., before given over to the inmate. Over the past maybe 10 years or so, it's become much more commonplace to have no paper delivered to inmates. So mail is sent off-site. It is scanned in, it is digitized, and the inmates receive it on their tablet or a kiosk through their version of email, so that all they get is a scanned version of the mail. Now, that is not true for legal mail. That's just the general mail. There are other ways that folks do that as well. Sometimes they just photocopy it essentially and give them a photocopied paper of the mail as opposed to a digitized email. But in any way possible, we correctional administrators try to limit the introduction of an actual piece of paper that someone on the outside is sending inside because how easy it is to soak that paper in drugs or whatever it might be to get things into the institution. So yes, the mail is received unless there's some reason not to, meaning it has inappropriate content or threatening content or images or whatever it is. The mail is received, all of it, but not necessarily in the same form in which it was sent. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's interesting you say that about the paper, and there's going to be people that are going to be like, I never would have thought of that. I thought the same thing with peanut M&Ms. Peanut M&Ms are not allowed in because you could put something, at least here in some of our facilities, in the M&M, whereas plain M&Ms are allowed in. You could replace the nut with something I never would have thought of, but I'm sure you've seen it all.
The creativity will blow your mind.
Right.
It is just absolutely unbelievable. But as you said, when you go through prisons, especially the hobby craft area, some of the recreation areas, or even the work sites, and you see the capacity of people, their creativity, their skill, the genius, it's heartbreaking, but it also is a reminder of when all those skills and abilities are used for nefarious purposes, you can do a lot of harm. So when you have a lot of time on your hands, a lot of creativity, and a lot of smarts, you can come up with some incredible ways of introducing contraband or beating the system generally.
Right. Judy, I want to ask you, over the course of your career, did the thought process change about keeping people in solitary confinement? And I would imagine there were many, many discussions about mental health with inmates. How did that evolve? How did that change? And kind of where are we today with a lot of these prisons?
It is a perennial topic. It has been discussed certainly since when I started in corrections many years ago. And again, as I said, it's very challenging to remove somebody from the general population and figure out how to manage their day-to-day existence. Ideally, it's used for a short term. So it's a form of punishment. If you misbehave, we're going to pull you out and give you a timeout and then take you back and then allow you back in. So it's a form of punishment for 10 days, 15 days, 30 days. It's uncomfortable. It's unpleasant. Not going to do anybody, I don't think anybody believes any real harm short term. You might also be pulled out short term if you're having a mental health episode, or if you've been victimized and we need to protect you. Maybe we're going to then move you to another institution, but hopefully not keep you by yourself long term. There are cases, however, where people need to be kept by themselves long term, either because of the nature of the offense that they committed, or because of something that they've done in prison, or maybe something that's been done to them in prison. There are situations where people are going to be kept aside, isolated, if you will, for long periods of time. There was a movement in the late 80s, early 90s to create more of these supermax facilities, which are essentially institutions where everybody is kept in isolation. The Bureau of Prisons retrofitted a facility in Marion, Illinois in the late 1980s to be sort of a temporary supermax, and then we built a new supermax in Florence, Colorado. It is designed to house people essentially in their cells for 23 hours a day, for as many years as they need to remain in that status. There is an opportunity to step down for some people as they demonstrate that they can conform and behave safely. So as long as those facilities have existed, as long as we've been keeping people isolated for longer periods of time, there's been debate about the mental health impact of it. There have been a variety of studies, some of which claim to show that it has very deleterious effects on people's mental health. The biggest problem with those studies is, to what are you comparing? We are not comparing the impact of somebody being held in isolation in prison versus somebody being out in the community. That would be a ridiculous comparison. We shouldn't even compare it to what it's like in most open movement institutions, in open movement facilities, because the people that are held in those very restricted environments have demonstrated an inability to behave in those environments. So their mental capacity is somewhat different, their mental health, their way of thinking. Or people who have just committed such horrific crimes that we don't believe we can safely house them in the general population. So I think the problem with a lot of the studies is the comparison group, the standard to which they are comparing impact, the impact on people's mental health to which they are attributing being isolated.
Right.
The reason that we should be skeptical of some of these studies is because the notion that someone is isolated is really not an accurate depiction of what life is like when you are held in a segregated or restricted housing unit. You are not away from all people all the time. You have staff visiting you on a daily basis, more than one staff member. You have an opportunity once a month, whatever it might be, to interact with people on the outside. You have opportunities to get mail, as you were saying. Often you have opportunities to do learning classes over closed circuit television programs. You are being interacted with, spoken to, provided for all hours of the day and night by staff members. You are not mixing and mingling with the general population. That is true. But we use that sort of special housing, restrictive housing, only when necessary to protect people's lives, essentially. An argument could be made that there are times it is a form of punishment. That may be true, but it has to be very, very severe because staff and prison administrators don't like keeping people in those restrictive environments. It's extremely expensive. It's extremely staff intensive. So we use it sparingly. And generally for people for whose mental health, mental state is already not in line with the general population, I would say.
Right.
And that's not always blaming them. There are times where things have happened to them. But as correctional administrators, you sort of take it as it is presented to you. And then you do the best that you can to provide them with a safe, secure, humane environment, as well as maintain the safety and security of everybody else in the institution, staff, inmates, and then the general public.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, like you said, the vast majority, at least from my observations in the Idaho prisons, are out in general population associating with people day in, day out. It's those that have lost that privilege because of their own behavior that are moved in most cases to isolation. I'm familiar with somebody even on death row here in Idaho who was able to have a religious person go in and meet with them and give them pamphlets and scriptures and whatnot. So it seems like the percentage overall of those in isolation would be very minor. But I would imagine nationwide, there's got to be a shortage like there is on the outside world of mental health experts. I mean, it'd be great if every single inmate could have their own therapist, but there simply aren't the resources for that.
That's true. In terms of numbers, it's typically less than 1% of inmates who are held in a restricted housing environment long term. In terms of spiritual guidance, that is a very frequent event. For inmates who are held in restricted housing, they are provided spiritual counseling, guidance, religious people come and meet with them very often. In terms of mental health providers, they also get an inordinate amount of mental health providers visiting them, checking on them, speaking to them. They don't always want to engage, but it is made available to them.
Yeah.
On a much, much higher basis than inmates in the general population. So they are given many, many more resources than anybody else would receive, and those resources are brought to them. So as opposed to inmates in the general population, you feel sick, you go to the doctor, you feel that you need to talk to a counselor, therapist, psychologist, you take it upon yourself. For individuals who are held in the restricted housing units, everybody is brought to them to check on them, to get an affirmative. You don't want to speak to a counselor, you don't need a therapist, so that people are consistently and constantly getting a read on how they are doing. And it's a much higher level of service than other individuals get in a prison environment.
Judy, what would you say over the course of your career? What's one of the main things you learned working with the prison system, working in the legal justice system that the public may not be aware of or may have a misconception of? Like when you hear something, having been in there, are you like, wait, that's not quite right?
Well, it usually starts when people don't believe that I was a correctional officer in a male institution when I was 20 with braces. How could you possibly have? How many guns did you carry? No, I didn't carry any guns. How many people were with you to help you and protect you? Nobody, because corrections is a people business. The number of staff versus inmates in any prison on any given day would really surprise people. So if you have a prison with 1,000 inmates, the number of staff working on a shift is going to be far less than 100. In a housing unit, you might have one correctional officer with 250 inmates. Those and no weapons inside, obviously. No weapons at all, because the inmates would be able to take the weapons from the staff at any point, right? So when you hear that, what people should begin to understand is it's a business that depends on communication. It depends on people's ability to interact effectively with other people. If you don't do that well, you won't make it in corrections. When you're interacting with people on a continual, ongoing basis, you start to develop relationships with people and you see them as human beings, which is exactly what we would want in a prison environment. That's how prisons are able to function, as a matter of fact. The staff member know all the inmates by name. They know something about their story and their family and their job and everything else, because that just is what happens when you are working side by side with people all day, every day. Inmates allow staff to supervise them. If they didn't, there would be a disturbance every day. Inmates want prisons to run safely and securely and in an orderly manner for everybody's safety and security. So staff and inmates have a lot in common when they're inside those fences, walls, gates every day in terms of how they want things to go. There are certainly differences. Inmates are looking to beat the system all the time, and staff are looking to prevent them from doing so. They don't want them to harm one another. They don't want to introduce contraband. But in terms of the day-to-day operations, nobody wants things to be disrupted. When things are disrupted, inmates stay in their cell. They don't go to the chow hall. They don't go to work. They don't go to classes. They don't go to recreation. So nobody wants that. Everybody wants the institutions to operate smoothly. And I think people on the outside really don't understand that at all. A prison's a city, right? Everybody has their job in the city, whether it's in medical or education or recreation or whatever it is. Everybody has their job, everybody has their role, everybody wants it to run smoothly. For the most part, correctional staff are very compassionate, hardworking, dedicated folks. They understand very well that 97, 98% of people in prison are coming out one day, going back to their families, going back to their jobs. They want to see them succeed. They understand that they are more likely to succeed when they leave if they're treated as human beings while they're inside. And by the way, if they get a skill, if they get an education, if they deal with their substance abuse, everybody understands that. And for the most part, everybody's working towards that common goal. And so when you walk through prisons, you see people talking to each other, interacting with one another. You don't see hostility and degrading behavior and all that. It's very unusual, even in the high security institutions.
Right. Very helpful, Judy. I appreciate your insight. Is there anything that you want to add?
No, I don't think so. I think it's really wonderful that prisons are letting people come in now more and see and gain some understanding of what it's like, because the reality is, I think we are always going to have prisons. They're a very important part of our criminal justice system. And if we would fund them well, and if we had good people to come work there, they would become even better places, and we wouldn't have as much use of restrictive housing segregation, and we would have better programs and better education, and that benefits everybody. So kudos to everybody that's working in facilities. Kudos to people that have an interest, whether it's reporters like you or people that just want to come in and see. We need to all be supportive of what you noted. Right now is a difficult time because they're hurting for staff just like law enforcement are around the country. And that's difficult. You have staff working overtime a lot, being told, no, you can't go home to your family. We need you to stay for the next shift so that we can keep the institution operating. That's really difficult. And we need more good people to come work at our institutions to avoid that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
that's about it. Thank you.
My thanks to Judy for taking time to chat with us and really kind of, help us see things from the other side. And I have been through many jails in my career, couple of prisons, not a lot of prisons. And I found that most of the people that work in there are just very nice people, as she mentioned. So thank you to Judy, and thank you to newspapers.com. They sponsor Courtroom Insider. And today when I was preparing for this, I'm like, I should go on newspapers.com and Google a prison escape. Because who doesn't love a good prison escape, as long as it doesn't end with something really bad. So I went and I typed in Idaho prison escape, and this guy came up, Claude Dallas. I had never heard of this case. Have you? This is wild. Let me read you this story. This is from the Idaho Statesman, March 31st, 1986, from newspapers.com. Convicted killer Claude Dallas, serving a 30-year sentence for killing 2 state fish and game officers, escaped from the Idaho State Penitentiary Sunday night, prison officials said early today. "We have lost him," said Ralph Pierce, a deputy warden in charge of programs at the prison. The escape alert was issued late Sunday night. Pierce said Dallas had last been seen about 7:35 on the ball field of the penitentiary. Dallas had been convicted in 1982 of killing game wardens Bill Pogue and Conley Elms during a bloody winter encounter in the mountains in 1981. Corrections and other law enforcement officers began searching units of the prison when Dallas was found to be missing during a count of inmates in the 10-house cell block around 10 p.m. Sunday. Warden A.J. Arave said today that Dallas escaped right after being visited by a woman friend from Nevada. Dallas was returning from the visiting area when he used wire cutters to cut through two fences near the administration building. He said dogs tracked Dallas's scent to the driveway outside the prison. Correction officers don't know how he got the wire cutters. Authorities stopped the woman in Nevada and were questioning her about 2 a.m. today. Arave says it appears another inmate had posed as Dallas walking across the prison yard, making it appear that Dallas had returned to his cell block after the visit from the woman. The escape also was not appeared to be connected to a lockdown from the week previous. He was wearing blue denim prison-issued clothing when he was last seen. Prison officials could not confirm that Dallas was armed, but Pierce said he was considered dangerous. Okay, I'd never heard of this. I'd never heard about the killing of the Fish and Game officers. Did a bit of research. That's a crazy story. They end up catching this guy. He ends up being acquitted. And he serves his time in prison for the murder of the Fish and Game officers. He serves 22 of a 30-year prison. He was released 20 years ago in February of 2005. After serving 22 years, not 20, 22 years. And he's out. I learned all of this from newspapers.com. I think we should do a whole Courtroom Insider on this and see if Mr. Dallas is willing to do an interview with me. I guess he's last been sighted living in Grouse Creek, Utah, and in the Alaska wilderness. They made a TV movie about him. There's been a song about it. There's been true crime authors. One of the books is called Give a Boy a Gun. Outlaw movies. Anyway, here I am. I didn't know anything about this story thanks to newspapers.com. This is the problem with me and newspapers.com. I go on a deep dive and I can't stop. And that's what happened this afternoon for like an hour. Thanks to newspapers.com for sponsoring us. You can go try them. You get 7 days free. Type in Claude Dallas and let me know. Do you remember this case? Like, do you remember about it? I had no idea, but there we go. Okay. Tomorrow night, Courtroom Insider. We have Chris Hansen from the Predator series, not the movies. Yesterday, a guy at church was like, you said the Predator series last Friday. And I thought like the movies, not the movies. I'm sorry. It's from the To Catch a Predator. He did To Catch a Predator on NBC and now he does the Take a Seat. He'll be here. So if you have any questions for him, I know many of you sent me some questions last week. Send them to questions@eastidahonews.com. And we will have the latest on the Ellen Greenberg hearing that happens tomorrow. Here's where you can find me. I'm on Facebook. Go ahead and give me a follow if you haven't. Would love that. X, Instagram, and YouTube. Hit subscribe if you haven't because we love subscriptions and we love that we can give you this news and keep you updated here on Courtroom Insider. And I can't thank you enough for following along. We have the best audience and thank you all so much. We have some great programming planned for the next month. So hope you'll stay tuned. Thanks again to my guest, Judy. Thank you for joining me. Have a good night. We'll see you tomorrow.